Test J, passage 1, question 7. It can be inferred from the passage that the author would be most likely to believe which one of the following. Right away, I think I'm not going to infer anything, and I am not going to speculate about what the author would believe. I'm going to pick an answer that is based on the passage. It says inferred from the passage. From the passage is the important part here. Lots of students will miss this question because they think, oh no, I'm supposed to infer something that wasn't stated. Infer just means must be true. So I'm not looking to really infer anything. I'm looking for something that has to be true because that's what it said in the passage. So what did the passage say? A, each of Dove's works can be classified as either primarily poetry or primarily fiction, even though it may contain elements of both. I can see why you might not have liked that answer, but that answer is correct because there is evidence. I think it came up late in the passage. Let's see, line 40-ish, so that's the middle of the last paragraph, or sorry, the beginning of the last paragraph, says that her poetry offers example after example of lyric narrative. That is talking about her poetry as its own separate thing, right? So with her work, it's not like it's all just one muddy thing and you can't really tell whether it's poetry or tell whether it's fiction. Remember, the whole point was Rita Dove's poetry has elements of fiction and her fiction has elements of poetry. Well, the author is classifying her work as either fiction or poetry, but it has elements of both. Yeah, at the end of the passage, it is where it talks about her fiction. So many passages in her fiction achieve the status of lyric narrative, blah, blah, blah. So she does write in both genres, but she fuses those genres within individual works, even though most of them can be classified as one or the other. So it's the whole last paragraph, really, that's my justification for A. Now let me see if I can get rid of B, C, D, and E. B says, the aesthetic value of lyric narrative resides in its representation of a sequence of events rather than in its ability to evoke inner states. What? I thought it was both. I mean, lyric narrative is when we're fusing the two genres together. So it's going to have lyric elements, but it's also going to have narrative elements, which means that it's going to be, I guess, aesthetically pleasing, both because it is representing events and because it is evoking inner states. I don't have any evidence to pick B. C, the way in which Dove blends genres in her writing is without precedent. Too strong. That's a perfect example of an answer where they said she was important. They said she was crossing these boundaries which are not commonly crossed. They didn't say she's the first one in history to do this, and that's why we cannot pick C. You know, matter of fact, aren't people in Germany doing it all the time? Without precedent would mean without precedent anywhere. Even if she's the very first American to do it, if there's people in Europe who are doing it before her, that makes C wrong. We can't pick C. D says, narrative that uses lyrical language is generally aesthetically superior to pure lyric poetry. What? Where's your evidence for that? This author thinks it's fortunate that people are out there crossing this divide. This author didn't say that lyric narrative is better than pure poetry. I have no evidence for D. E, writers who successfully cross the generic boundary between poetry and fiction often try their hand at genres such as drama as well, which is purely skeptical. Drama was never mentioned anywhere in this passage at all. I'll tell you one thing they're never asking you to do on the reading comp. They are never asking you to make shit up. And if you picked E, you're making shit up. That is not what was in the passage. They're not asking you for your opinion. They're not asking you to read the tea leaves. They're asking whether you comprehended what you read, and A is the only one that matches what you read. B, C, D, and E are conclusively not what you read. The answer here is A.